we are going to talk about abandoned underground stations, the best known must surely be Aldwych, or Strand. It was part of the Piccadilly line, a single station on a spur that closed in 1994. It was never a hugely popular station, understandably so. It was never particularly convenient, being served by a shuttle from Holborn with no direct service to the Piccadilly line, so you'd have to change trains for the sake of one stop which was within walking distance. As early as 1914, 7 years after opening, one of the tunnels leading to it was closed. During the Second World War, it was used as a shelter and bomb-proof storage facility for relics from the British Museum. By 1958 it was decided to close the station, but it limped on until 1994. By this time it was only served at peak hours. So, what was the point of it? Why was it built? Well, for that you need to know a little bit about the history of the Piccadilly line. It's all very complicated, so for the sake of sanity I'll try to keep it brief. The Piccadilly line was made up of several different proposed lines that were amalgamated. One was called the Great Northern and Strand Railway, which would have run from Alexandra Palace to Aldwych. In 1901, this scheme was bought out by the notorious Charles Yerkes, who is kind of a recurring character in this series. Yerkes combined it with another scheme, the Brompton and Piccadilly Circus Railway, and that, plus or minus a few alterations, gave us the Piccadilly line. Little note, the station was originally known as Strand, but was renamed Aldwych in 1915, but for convenience I'll call it Aldwych throughout. I made another video about this, which I'll link in the description below. The new line should, in theory, have bypassed Aldwych altogether, but it was decided to build it anyway for two reasons. The first was that it was hoped that the line would prove popular with theatre-goers, and for the first year a special service was run from Finsbury Park to Aldwych. Unfortunately, the hoped-for theatre traffic never materialised. It probably didn't help that one of those theatres, the Royal Strand, had to be demolished to make way for the station. The second, and perhaps the more interesting for its implications for the tube map, was that they didn't intend to terminate at Aldwych. The idea was that the line would continue under the river and terminate at Waterloo. I personally think the idea of a direct service from Holborn to Waterloo is a pretty decent one. I can confirm from personal experience that taking the tube from one to another is such a drag that it's actually possible to make the journey quicker on foot. Try it yourself sometime. Plans were put forward for the extension in 1919, but never happened. Again in 1948, and again never happened. A third proposal was part of a much larger 1965 plan known as the Fleet Line, and I've got some videos about that planned which may be of interest. Unfortunately, the money wasn't there for the Fleet Line, and so the plan was postponed. The fleet would ultimately take a very different route and be renamed the Jubilee Line during construction. Shunned again, poor Aldwych was seemingly built to fail. These days it's mostly known as a filming location, but there have been some interesting proposals for its future. One involved extending the Docklands Light Railway up the Strand, reopening the station en route. Another involved turning the tunnel into a cycle route. So, who knows? Maybe Aldwych will rise again. Or maybe not. Hi all. Hope you enjoyed this doomed episode of Tales from the Tube. If you did, sling a like my way, share and subscribe. What do you think? Could Aldwych have been something more, or was it doomed from the start? Let me know what you think in the comments section. And I'll see you again soon for another Tale from the Tube.